And welcome to Mekelle Foresight. And this is Mikael Mnasse, producer and host of the show. What is the state of the country in terms of peace and security, the rule of law, the narratives guiding and shaping the country's political dispensation and nation building, and also the Ethiopia's image in the world and its standing in the community of nations? Here with me today is Getachew Reda, Executive Committee member of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, to help us make sense of it all. Thank you, Getachew Reda, for coming to the show.
My pleasure.
For us to have a grasp of the context, please give us your assessment of where we stand as a country. You can start by giving us your reading of the political landscape in Ethiopia.
The country is in a total mess, as simple as that. Which about 30 months ago was touted by many observers, Ethiopians included, as a reform-minded leadership came to office. And that leadership, which is, of course, headed by Abiy Ahmed, has all but squandered whatever reservoir of goodwill there was from Ethiopians on its behalf. And now we have reached a point where this leadership by Abiy Ahmed is entirely obsessed with consolidation of power, except that it has no clue whatsoever what it means to consolidate power in a multi-national state such as Ethiopia. So it has been trying to kill its way out of every crisis that it has generated. It has been making all sorts of efforts to not to address the security challenge of the people, but to create a sort of violence parity among regions. Okay, it's one thing to fail to address the violence in Oromia. It's one thing to fail to address the violence in the Amhara region, the violence in the southern regions. But what Abiy Ahmed and his coterie of close advisors are doing is to make sure that violence doesn't necessarily remain within Oromia, within Amhara, or within the south, rather exporting violence to other parts of the country, so we can sort of create a parity of violence in many parts of the country. So it's a total miss. People who were supposed to have reformist ambitions are now clearly making every effort under the sun to ensconce themselves as dictators. Of course, Abiy Ahmed has been trying everything, has been trying every trick in the book to install himself as a newly minted dictator of Ethiopia. It's very unfortunate it's not working. It's very unfortunate. What he has been doing is a drawback to 40 years ago, where young majors and colonels came to office, hijacking the revolution in the 1970s, and then installed themselves, especially in the person of Mengistu Haile Mariam, installed themselves as absolutely unqualified dictators that eventually claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people in this country. So it's a total mess.
So how is it impacting on the social fabric of the country?
Well, look, the social fabric of, I mean, if it wasn't for a strong social fabric, I would say, amongst the people of Ethiopia, what Abiy has been trying to do ever since he came to office has all the trappings of what every tin pot dictator does, divide and rule and all that, trying to pit Amharas against Tigray, trying to pit Oromos against Amharas, Amharas against Oromos. He's particularly interested in maintaining the position of power, And to the extent that power physically is concentrated in Arab Kilo, he's not particularly interested in whether there is peace in other parts of the country, as long as he has unfettered access to the road between Miazia 27 and Dababai and Boli Road. That's pretty much what he does. But unfortunately for him, every step he takes to consolidate his power is in fact causing this social fabric you were telling me to fray, because he tries to create a situation where Amharas should be suspicious of Tigrayans. Tigrayans should be suspicious of Amharas. Oromos should be suspicious of Amharas and Tigrayans, and all that kind of stuff. And it's very unfortunate, but yeah, people, unfortunately for us, maybe it is the weight of history. Maybe it's the fact that people are now waking up to the enormity of stupidity represented by, and in fact cruelty represented by Abiy and his company. Nobody knows, but we're still holding. But yeah, it's a powder keg. What Abiy has done is create a situation where our relationships are so frayed, so fraught with suspicion that anything that happens, anything that's orchestrated by the state at his behest, can now pit one group against another. But like I said, the fact that history has still its weight on us simply means we have not yet started killing each other. But otherwise, everything has been done by Abiy and his company to make sure that the Amharas are against Tigrayans, the Tigrayans are against Oromos, all that kind of stuff. Every Tin Pot dictator tries that kind of trick, and Abiy has been doing it for quite some time.
Of course, it is truism to say that economy is a reflection of politics. Please shed some light on the state of the economy.
Well, I don't have to resort to very sophisticated economic analysis to show how much the economy is in trouble. In fact, it's in doldrums, as they say. I can give you a very good example. In Oromia, the protests against Abiy's regime have been running for several weeks now. And as we know, the capital Addis is at the heart of Oromia. And people in Addis are bearing the brunt of the sanctions that are being imposed by the youth movement in Oromia. So price of essential commodities, bread and butter issues in Addis are skyrocketing. So I don't have to come up with sophisticated economic analysis to show you how difficult the situation is in Addis, because every DK and Hari in the streets of Addis understands what it means to be in a situation where one has to pay twice, if not 3 times as much a price as he would have, say, 10 months ago for a kilo of this and that. Second, the leadership of Abiy Ahmed is not in any way interested in economic issues. To the extent that they are interested in economic issues, they are mostly interested in how much money is going to be dispersed for their loyal customers, and how much money they will withdraw from people who are not particularly interested in their approach. I wouldn't say they have policies at all. This is not a leadership that is steeped in this tradition of trying to figure out what policy works better for the country. This is a leadership mostly interested in trying to figuring out how to convince enough number of people among Ethiopians to be confused or think twice about asking critical questions about why things are not working the way they expect them to. So this leadership of Abiy Ahmed is mostly interested in window dressing, as they call it, window dressing in the sense that, for example, Abiy Ahmed is mostly busy trying to renovate the Grand Palace of Addis Ababa. And the strangest thing is, as a matter of fact, the Arat Kilo Palace is surrounded by people who have probably the lowest living conditions in the country. I'm not blaming for having created this situation. I'm not blaming Abiy for having created this situation because it has been so for quite some time now. What makes Abiy's approach is very bizarre is that he thinks the renovation of the palace is going to create some kind of relief among people who have bread and butter issues. So his economic policies, if he has any, are mostly revolve around such projects which, like I said, could only count as window dressing. Abiy has been very clever by half, I should say, trying to capitalize on projects that had been in place the last 27 years and trying to take advantage of inauguration ceremonies and all that. Otherwise, he has hardly launched any project whatsoever except for the window dressing projects of Arat Kilo, which, let's face it, have never achieved anything other than creating an illusion that this is a guy who's interested in beautifying everything, mostly, of course, his residence and his surroundings. Otherwise, he's not interested in changing the lives of or transforming the lives of people. He has hardly mentioned the case of peasants, which are, of course, the bulk of the Ethiopian population. He, while bragging, having created a job opportunity of the landscaping project he has in Arat Kilo, his policies or his lack of policies have resulted in the lack of job opportunities for maybe 10 times as many people who had been involved in, say, industrial park projects. So while he is busy working on window dressing projects such as the Arat Kilo project, thousands of people are losing their jobs in Adama or Hawassa or Mekelle industrial parks, which I would have thought would have served as an opportunity or a source of job opportunity for thousands of people. So the state of the economy is in shambles, obviously. For one thing, because it's not being handled by people who have a clear understanding of what's happening. Second, it is being handled by a prime minister whose idea of growth or development has nothing to do with what it means to ensure growth or development. Someone who is more interested in window dressing than actual development endeavors.
So huge socioeconomic and political problems. But what do you say to the authorities of the federal government who try to explain away that such problems as being in the nature of any such transition?
What transition are we talking about? Transition. But I mean, Abiy didn't come to office through coup or through a violent revolution or anything. He came to office because EPRF decided to reform itself. So he was supposed to, dot his I's and cross his T's, as they say. There was little that the situation demanded of him, except for making sure that the reform process, which had support from every corner of the ruling party, to succeed. And if transition is going to take 3 years, and if these 3 years prove to be a downhill journey, as we have unfortunately witnessed. And then there is no such thing as transition. He had a reservoir of goodwill, by the way. The first 6 months, 7 months of his leadership, even me, who had doubts about the sincerity of his moves, who had serious issues whether this guy was serious about leading the country out of crisis. Even I was, kind of secretly hoping that maybe he would succeed, But I have said to him as much that I wanted him to succeed. But it was as if he was determined against success. It was as if he had to sabotage every opportunity there is for him to succeed. Because everything he did, everything he's been doing ever since, flies full in the face of what any sane leader would do under the circumstances he's been facing, okay? Talk about transition, that's absolute baloney, because Abiy should not have worried about support. He had our full support, okay? The leadership support. He had little or no clue whatsoever what it means to be in charge of a complex country like Ethiopia, which has very complicated problems that get even more complicated by the day. For him, it was just about some magic words like Meddemer. He would tell you stuff like, okay, because we think positive and then positive results will transpire. And that kind of crap doesn't work. It takes serious people who have serious ideas about addressing serious problems in this country to make a difference. Abiy has anything but serious intentions, serious plans, and serious ideas about transforming this nation, which has serious problems that need to be addressed by serious people. It's very unfortunate that we are this country is in the hands of a guy whose idea of transforming the country is about transforming his palace, window dressing in the most ridiculous forms of sense. If he tells you this is part of transition, all you have to tell him is he's lying so he stays. That's not the case.
And he was liberally dispersing hope, which was then the only commodity, viable commodity.
Wasn't a bad idea, but yeah.
And it's getting rarer by the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to begin with, it's a good thing for a leader to dispense hope, if that's possible, to tell people that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. But that's not it. That's not good enough. You have to show them that there is indeed light at the end of the tunnel. But for people like Abiy, they come out swinging, threatening the use of force against people who assert their rights, killing the very young Oromos under whose behest, under whose shoulders he came to office, whose movement he rode to power and everything. It's just dispensing hope is not good enough. You have to be the hope that you claim to be. You have to show people that there is light at the end of the tunnel. You have to show people that you are in this for real, that you mean business, that you want to do everything in your capacity to address their problems, not to explain away your failure, to be in there through thick and thin to work towards their success. No, Abiy doesn't want to do that because it takes serious leadership and he doesn't have one. What matters for him is whether the rest of the world thinks he's a reformer. What the heck is being a reformer unless you put bread and butter issues as a priority? What the heck would it mean to be popular among Western leaders? I'm not sure if he's popular among Western leaders. I'm not sure if he has the capacity to explain to them what sort of vision he has towards his country. He doesn't. I mean, all the obfuscation about Meddemer, obfuscation about the vision and all that, that's just plain crap. If it simply means the Walaitas are now worse off 2 years after his coming to power than before he came to power, if the Oromos are worse off, now than when he came to power. If the Amharas, the Tigrayans are worse off than when it comes to power, as far as their relations with the federal government is concerned, obviously it's time for him to ask questions, really, to have a very cold, hard look at the reality on the ground and ask of himself whether he's doing the right thing. But he's not capable of doing that kind of stuff, because for him, he is preordained to become the king. And whatever happens, whatever wrong stuff that happens in this country, it's not his fault. It's my fault. It's your fault. It's the Walaida's fault. It's the Oromo's fault. It's the Amhara's fault. The Tigrayan's fault. Abiy cannot be in the wrong. It's very unfortunate. What we have in Arab Kilo now is a guy who thinks God had long preordained his imperial ambitions. He wants to rule over Eritrea. He wants to rule over. Lord it over Somalia and everything. I mean, he has no shame. He keeps dispensing all kinds of advices to people, proffering all kinds of unsolicited advices to Western communities. That, Mussolini, he told Federico Mogherini at some point that what Mussolini had envisioned for the Horn of Africa was, in fact, the right thing to do, the right thing to pursue, which was bringing Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia together. And when I heard this story the first time from people who attended the meeting, it didn't sound strange for me, because I know the sort of ambitions he had. But it was strange for me because I kind of thought he would grow into his position in office. But it's very unfortunate. This is a leader in a leadership that has difficulty growing into their responsibilities in office. Abiy has difficulty growing into his office, responsibility. It's very unfortunate.
Tell us your views regarding Prosperity Party's modus operandi, regarding its handling of popular demands by the people. Its relations with the regions, and also constituent parties of the party itself, and dealing with differences.
Well, look, Prosperity Party is not a party in the proper sense of the term. It is Abiy Ahmed multiplying himself in various forms, as it were. The reason why TPLF didn't want to join the Prosperity Party has nothing to do with has nothing to do with the issue of whether or not having a unified national level party. We have been fighting for that. We would not have had any problem joining any party that at least is unified in terms of its policy. What Prosperity Party was meant to do was to multiply Abiy Ahmed's borrowed dreams. Okay, Abiy Ahmed has borrowed dreams all over, and then we were supposed to join in parting of those borrowed dreams. We flatly said no, which I pride myself on having been part of that decision to say no. Now, PP being a reflection, mostly a very funny parody of what Abiy wants to do, simply means it doesn't have a unified position. And nobody knows what the executive committee of the PP looks like. Nobody knows who is in, who is out. Nobody knows who represents. What I know, the de facto the chairperson is Abiy. Well, it does require a genius to figure that out. But nobody knows if he was elected to be the head of the Prosperity Party. The National Electoral Board of Ethiopia, which was supposed to have presided over issues such as this, has never asked a question. And nobody knows who is the executive committee member, central committee member of the PP. And if I tell you I know what the PP wants as a party, I would be lying. But I know for a fact what Abiy wants and what doesn't want. In terms of its relationship with regions, Abiy wants to lord it over from Arat Kilo. He wants to appoint every regional pontiff. He wants us to impose his will on every region. In fact, the first effort before Somali region was directed against Tigray. He sent commandos early on in his leadership to Tigray. We took care of those commandos.
What do you mean?
Well, we didn't kill them. We just kept them at the airport, and then, of course, we take our peace and stability seriously. So we sent them packing. Okay, let's just say. But at least we didn't give them a chance to shoot their way out of the airport or to kill any and every TPLF leadership, which we have every reason to believe they came to do. So we disarmed them and sent them back to where they came from. And then I have issues with Abdullah and his leadership, okay? But it's one thing to have issues with Abdullah's leadership, but it's entirely different for a federal government to send in troops and remove a duly elected president of a region. And then he's been changing regional leaders ever since, okay? So he wants to dictate terms from Arat Kilo. That's why he's not comfortable with what Tigray does, what TPLF does, because, I mean, look, let's face it. I personally cannot take orders from a guy who has no clue whatsoever what it means to be in the leadership. But TPLF, more importantly, is never interested in abdicating its responsibility on behalf of someone who has no freaking clue about what it means to be in charge of a country. Okay? And we have issues on matters of principle and all that. And if the Walaitas have issues, in fact, the Sidamas, you would probably remember, the Sidamas held a referendum. It's a hard-won referendum, okay? And even before the referendum, Abiy was on record in parliament, came out, if you guys, I'm quoting, if you guys think that we are only capable of using paints, using pencils, don't get wrong. We are also capable of using AK-47 assault rifles. That he was threatening people that he could use guns to silence them. Well, luckily for them, they persisted, they persevered, and they had a referendum. They won. Even after referendum, we was telling people that he couldn't grant regional status for Sidama because there were so many things to be worked out. Who the heck is he to prevaricate on the granting of statehood once the referendum had been conducted? And he was threatening the use of force. AK-47s, AK-47s work both ways. Okay, if people are forced to use AK-47s, they could as well use them against people who are threatening to use AK-47s. Okay, and the Walaitas, you saw the case of the Walaitas. The Walaitas were asking the same question that the Sidamas were asking. It's one thing to try to advise them against statehood, whatever the merits of such advices, but it's entirely different to try to kill, not try and kill, but in fact kill young Walaitas who, this is strange, who didn't protest in any way except that they didn't accept the fact that their leaders were being imprisoned, being jailed, being humiliated for raising a very normal question such as statehood, regional statehood. Okay? So he killed Walaitas not because they protested against the regime, but they protested against his move against people who represented their ideas of statehood. I mean, which is quite normal. So what is the sort of relationship? He wants us to radiate fear. He wants us to impose fear on regions, not You see, it's very unfortunate. Abiy has all the trappings of a Machiavellian, except that his understanding of what Machiavelli stood for is shaky at best, because maybe his understanding of Machiavelli's works is not that dependable. So he thinks radiating fear, inspiring fear, is far more important than winning the hearts and the minds of the people. So Abiy obviously is not fit for any 21st century form of dictatorship, because that's not the kind of stuff that's going to work here. You cannot continue to inspire fear in Ethiopia and hack your way through by resorting to violence and all that. That I don't think is going to work. So his modus operandi is a 19th to early 20th century style of intimidating people into submission, killing your way out of every crisis, hacking your way through any impasse, and then brazenly lying about things, and then expecting the rest of the world to believe you. Well, that's very unfortunate. In a post-Google world, that's not going to work. And Abiy is very, very much in for surprise, except that his surprise, his moves are costing lives.
So increasing polarization between the different political parties and also violence everywhere.
Yes.
It's become the order of the day.
He is a violence entrepreneur in every sense of the term.
So do we have cause to fear that this may descend into some sort of civil war?
It is already proving. I mean, it's not just a hypothetical fear. It's obvious that, he's been telling the leaders of Amhara, and of course the leaders of Amhara, who are not leaders of Amhara, have been promising to wage war against Tigray. The fact that we are not fighting against each other is because, for one thing, the people of Amhara are not interested in the war. Second, TPLF and the leadership of Tigray and the people of Tigray are not interested in the war, okay? If it wasn't for reluctance on our part to heed the reckless remarks of the likes of Temesgen Turuna, who, to all intents and purposes, is just an errand boy for Abiy, we would have already ended up in unmitigated violence. Look, I mean, the number of people who are armed in Tigray has always been armed. We have never had issues with arms or whatever. These Tigrayans are people who have paid hundreds of thousands of lives to assert their freedom against tyranny. And they would never countenance any form of tyranny, whether it comes from Arat Kilo or from Dejan office here, from Debrecen or from Getachew, whatever. Okay, that's one thing. But if it wasn't for our reluctance to heed the writings on the wall, we would have ended up fighting against Amhara militias, because Abiy is telling his errand boys in Bahar Dar, although they don't spend so much time as half a day in Bahar Dar, the likes of Temesgen Turuna have been calling for an all-out war. I mean, this is supposed to be a federation, for God's sake. What does Abiy Ahmed do? No, he wants it. He wants us to create more confusion, more conflict, so he can stay unscathed in power. Like I told you earlier, he's mostly interested in whether or not the road between the Lorenzo Ta'aza's road all the way through to Africa Avenue is clean for him to venture outside the country if he wants to. And then, he has the Republican Guard, which is not part of the Defense Ministry. And then he had his palace absolutely sequestered. I mean, absolutely protected I don't think is the right word, but protected by heavily armed Republican Guard and all that. And then the rest of the country could go into flames. He doesn't give a shit. Pardon my French. He is never worried about whether people are killed in Gedio. He's never worried about whether the Gumus are getting busy killed every freaking day. he is never worried about Tigrayans and Amharas getting at each other's throat, because that's his modus operandi. He wants us to create as much confusion, as much violence, as much chaos as he can, so he can sit comfortably in Arat Kilo and claim to be the leader of a free country, whatever that means.
And regarding Ethiopia's international image, how is it faring these days?
Well, I shudder. His enablers, Western enablers, touted him as, they over-invested in his capacity to deliver results. Westerners are more interested in Ethiopia as a market, to the extent that they are interested in telecoms. They are interested in telecoms, not in its infrastructure, in the fact that there are 100 million people who are going to use the telecom service. Okay, what Abiy is creating is a situation where even the 100% people who are potentially going to benefit or going to use the service of the telecom are now going to have difficulty using the service of the telecom. Okay, so the Westerners have their own issues. They saw in him a reformer in the sense that someone who could promote their interests. Okay, but unfortunately for them, this was a guy who didn't have any freaking clue what it means to reform a country that was working, that had been working, but that had serious issues. What EPRDF did was, okay, we have had our own fair share of successes, but there are problems here and there, and if we have to address them, if there is going to be a change in guard and everything, so be it. We haven't came to office promising that the only way to salvage what was left of our success under EPRDF was through reform. Okay, rather than undertaking reform, he was trying to cross out whatever there was in the checklist of the Westerners, and he was doing this and that, not in the interest of Ethiopians, but in the interest of Westerners. But now, Westerners are more interested in whether he would deliver on his promises to them than delivering on his promises to the people of Ethiopia. Okay, he deals with Egyptians, and he is more fearful of Egyptians than Ethiopians. Okay, he's more fearful of Americans. I mean, one of the strangest things, even an American would find it absolutely strange, for example, to hand over the issue of the Renaissance Dam. It's one thing to hand over the issues of Renaissance Dam to the Americans. Okay, it should have been dealt with within an African context. We had a trilateral arrangement between Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia. Okay, so he didn't consult anyone. He took this envelope on Renaissance Dam away from the trilateral arrangement. Okay, he could have taken it to the CFA, which is the Cooperative Framework Agreement, which is obviously which would obviously be respectful of our African brothers, but he took it to Washington DC. But stranger still, even Americans find it absolutely mind-boggling. Abiy agreed to the mediation, not of the State Department, which is capable of understanding the nuances of such arrangements, but the State Minister who has no freaking clue where Ethiopia is. And I can assure you, I can bet my life on it, whether State Minister understands what Ethiopia represents as a nation. But he took it, because for him, the source of legitimacy of his power is not the people of Ethiopia. It's the likes of State Minister. It's the likes of Jared Kushner, whatever, I don't know. So I'm not particularly interested. What's our image? I will tell you this. I was in Kenya. The last time I was outside the country was about 3 months ago. I was in Kenya. And people were confiding in me, or even saying it in public, that Abiy Ahmed was taking the country down the drain. Abiy Ahmed sent about 100 commandos to Jubaland to remove Ahmed Islam Madobe, so he could please Abdullah Farmajo. Farmajo is the president of Somalia. Because their patriarch, Isaias Afwerki, tells him to support. Farmajo doesn't control Mogadishu. He controls some part of Mogadishu. He lives in Villa Somalia and all these places, which is part of, he probably controls what used to be the base of the marine forces 20-something years ago. Otherwise, he doesn't have control over the rest of Somalia. And there are many parts of Somalia. I wouldn't consider Somaliland part of Somalia now because it's been independent for the last 30 years. Short of recognition, Somalia has been independent for the last 30 years. So no Somali leader has ever exercised or set foot, so much as set foot in Somaliland. But you have Puntland, at least, they extend a measure of legitimacy to the whole notion of Somalia, And you have Jubaland, you have Southwest Somalia, and the Central Somalia in Adado, and then in Baidhabo, in all those places, And Abiy sends commandos to remove a regional leader in Kismayo. He doesn't have any freaking clue what implication this kind of stupid move would have in relations between Somalia, the people of Somalia and Ethiopia.
So what are the cardinal principles informing and guiding Ethiopia's foreign policy at this time?
Promoting the borrowed dreams of Abiy Ahmed, nothing more, nothing less. He has no principles, cardinal or ordinal. He's just promoting this borrowed dreams of Abiy Ahmed.
So what bearing is it having on our national interest?
It's affecting our national interest in more ways than one. The negotiations on the Renaissance Dam would tell you it's not just about the number of megawatts shaved off the potential capacity of the Renaissance Dam, but the amount of years that's going to be required to fill the dam has now reached almost theoretically about 15 to 20 years, which flies full in the face of the expectation and the plans of the Ethiopians. I'm not sure if he's going to if he's not willing to hand over every national interest of Ethiopia to outsiders, because for him it's all about maintaining his grip on the trappings of power. So if selling out Ethiopia's interest piece by piece is what it takes to maintain his grip on power, he would do it. And he has been making it abundantly clear that he is more than willing to do it. It's very unfortunate.
It is to be remembered that the Tigray regional government had alerted the international community to the looming danger in the country. What is the response so far? Is it your expectation?
Well, we're not particularly interested in official responses to our queries or our concerns and everything. Obviously, we're not a state actor in the international politics, okay? But we are an important actor in international politics, whether they like it or not, whether we like it or not. Because whatever happens here, we're holding elections, and Abiy has threatened to use force against us for deciding to hold elections. He's not going to stop us. If he tries to stop us, we'll fend for ourselves. Whatever happens here is going to have far-reaching consequences in the entire region, not just in Ethiopia, okay? So to that extent, whatever we have been saying about the recklessness of Abiy's moves should be heeded by the international community. We're seeing signs that, in fact, that's registering to a certain extent, okay? Whether that is to our expectation is an entirely different matter. But the international community, for us, it's not just the international community should heed our warnings. More importantly, we are more interested in whether enough number of Ethiopians are wary of the kind of disastrous move that Abiy is making, which I have every reason to believe is the case. The international community can only have an auxiliary role throughout this process. Yes, there are signs that they are waking up to the fact that Abiy is not the kind of darling they held him out to be, the kind of reformer they made him out to be. Yes, that's not good enough though, because still, you know, some of the ambassadors in Addis have fears that if they speak out in public, they will be PNG'd. They would be declared persona non grata by Abiy Ahmed. He would stop at nothing to do that. But I know for a fact he is not particularly courageous enough to make those kind of moves, because his source of legitimacy is Western diplomats, not the people of Ethiopia. So, you know, the only thing that can alert him into sanity is the decision by the Ethiopian people to declare him persona non grata. But I have every hope and expectation that will PNG him, not otherwise. Okay.
So, what challenges are you foreseeing in the course of the elections, given the open threat from Abiy Ahmed?
That's all. What challenge? I mean, you know, Tamasgan was on record threatening to use force. Whether he's going to use force is a different story. Abiy was on record to use force. These are over threats. And we'll defend ourselves, because people are very, very adamant that they will hold the elections. You know what happened in the other day? In just one day, 51% of what we believed to be involved in elections, I mean, voters, registered themselves in just one day. What does it tell you? It speaks volumes about the readiness of the people of Tigray to take their rights seriously. And, you know, we have faced much worse adversities in the past. We're more organized now. We're more capable now. We have many people sympathizing with us, including many parts of Ethiopia. Okay? It's not so much the threat or the slogans of Abiy Ahmed and his lieutenants that keeps me awake at night. What matters is whether in Tigray we can ensure the free, fair, and democratic and credible nature of the election. And we're doing every effort possible to make sure that our elections are free and fair, and our elections are credible. That's the most important challenge, I should say. Otherwise,
is Tigray threatened militarily, particularly?
Yes, I mean, it's in public, for God's sakes. It's in public. Abiy is telling you he is going to take action. What does action mean? He's not going to insult us. He's not going to swear at us. He's not going to pray against us or anything. He was telling you in point blank, I mean, in a very clear manner that he would take action. Well, obviously, by taking action means taking military action. And the military, would the military hit his remarks? That's a different story. But whatever happens, we know the military is, so far at least, you know, in many parts of the country, the military is being forced to do things which it would shudder at contemplating doing, let alone doing. But at least in Tigray, we are in good terms with the regional command. But if the worst comes, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We just live with the fact that we have only ourselves to depend on as far as fending for ourselves goes. We'll fend for ourselves, no problem.
How imminent and how serious is this threat, and where is it coming from?
Am I going to discuss national security issues on media? No, I'm not. There is no point. It's imminent when the Prime Minister, the Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces, tells you he's going to take action. There is nothing more imminent than this. Whether he is going to make good on that threat is a totally different story. So, as far as we're concerned, we'll make sure every preparation we are making is based on the seriousness of such a threat, no matter how hollow it might turn out to be. But he's the prime minister anyway. He occupies the office. I personally don't take him seriously, but that doesn't mean that he's not causing serious damage to the country. He's killing people. He's killing thousands, isn't he? He is presiding over a reckless move that is dislocating people from their livelihood. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, okay? Internally displaced people. So that I don't take him seriously doesn't mean his moves, his reckless moves, should not be taken seriously. They should be, and we take his reckless remarks seriously. Enough, at least, to prepare ourselves for whatever eventualities there are. But we are hoping and expecting that this stupidity is not going to be shared by sane people like the defense forces. Okay.
Given the Eritrean government's overt and covert actions before, are you concerned? Is the government of Tigray concerned that of having to deal with on two fronts at the same time?
Yes, it's not just two fronts, but three fronts. Temesgen Turuna is not acting on his own behalf, on behalf of Maharas, but he is, as an Iran boy, doing Abiy's bidding. Yeah, we're concerned. So whatever happens, we have to fend for ourselves. Isaias has been on record, and he wants to get even with TPLF. TPLF stood in the way of Isaias' pharaonic ambitions. It's very unfortunate, Isaias was hoping to become the 21st century pharaoh in the region. He sent expeditionary forces to Congo, to Somalia, and all those places, okay? But this Seta generarian leader still wants to get even with TPLF. So he stops at nothing, he would stop at nothing to get even with TPLF, to even all the scores with TPLF, all the scores with Tigray. And now he has what Vladimir Ilyich Lenin would call a useful idiot in Abiy Ahmed, and he wants to use Abiy Ahmed and his relations with Abiy Ahmed to get back, to get at us. So he's been on record. I'm not deciphering a code or something. He's been saying it in public, okay? So yes, if there is going to be threat, the threat would emanate from every corner, okay? Tigray has to fend for itself. It will.
Thank you very much indeed, Getachew Reda, for
these
reflections.
My pleasure.
Well, we have come to the end of the interview, and this is goodbye from me and the technical crew. And thank you for tuning in till we meet in my next edition on Mekelle Foresight.